among jazz musicians who knew him well, he was called Little Jazz. And that's because he was a really small guy. He's short, you know. But when he put his trumpet to his face, there was nothing small about that. He ran trumpet players out of the building. We're talking about one of the most gifted, talented guys that ever touched the instrument. Born David Roy Eldridge on the north side of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yes, sir. A lot of great musicians from Pittsburgh. Born to a family of two hard-working parents and an older brother who was exactly 3 years older than he. His father was a teamster. Yeah, we had black teamsters back there at the turn of the century in places like Pittsburgh. You'll get that joke tomorrow. And his mother was an accomplished pianist who could play anything she heard from ear. She probably had perfect pitch and didn't know it. Well, little Jazz, he wasn't all that much for the music, except his mother put him at the piano at 5 years of age. And he started playing what he wanted to, when he wanted to. By 7, he claims to be able to play entire blues compositions, phrases, solos, everything, by age 7. But that was just something he did because Mama said so. His brother was a woodwind player. Actually, he played violin, clarinet, and sax. His older brother, Joe. So Joe is out there as a young kid playing in bands. And they needed a drummer. Guess what? Little Eldridge learned to play the drums. And by the age of 7, he was playing in his brother's band. But his brother proposed to him. Man, I heard you playing a bugle. I know a lot about bugles. I did DCI for many years. And the original bugle, the thing you play taps on at military funerals, has no valves, has no chromaticism. You can only play in one series. And he was pretty good at it. So his brother said, man, you should pick up the valve trumpet so you can do a whole lot more with it. You can do a lot more with it. Nah. But when he joined his brother's band, his brother pushed it. So he finally relented and started playing the valved trumpet. But it wasn't his choice. He'd been pushed into it, so he did like a lot of kids do when they're pushed into something. He didn't put his heart into it. He didn't practice. He didn't make much progress at all. But around age 11, there was a tragedy in the family, especially difficult for young Roy. His mother passed away. And to make it even more difficult, his father did not wait long enough, according to Roy, to find himself another wife. So now Roy got another mother in the place of the mother he loved, and he ain't happy about that at all. So he spent all of his time locked up in his room. Doing what? Practicing the trumpet. There's something about practicing that will change things with a musical instrument. And he listened to people he liked. And he really couldn't find anyone that was playing the trumpet like he liked the trumpet to sound, like he had in his mind he wanted the trumpet to be. So he just kept practicing on the things he wanted to hear a trumpet do until he was doing stuff that no one else could do. This was especially true of his upper range. He's one of the first guys to actually play in what we call the screaming range of the trumpet. Oh, yes. And he played lines that were very much unlike the lyrical things and the blues and the growls and stuff that trumpet players in the Dixieland era, I say Dixieland, not a good word, the New Orleans area played. He wanted to play fast lines, up and down. Yes, skips, jumps, laterals, all of it. And that's what he practiced all the time. High notes and all these fast lines. So when he finally emerged as a trumpet player, people started going, ooh, 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 he's somewhere around 11 years old about this time. And he's already starting to venture away from home and play little gigs in what they call territory bands. He probably went to West Virginia, and he probably went maybe as far north as Erie, Pennsylvania, but just Youngstown, Ohio, that little circle there. It's actually a pretty good musical scene in that part of the Midwest. So about this time, he had a problem at school too, because he was expelled. They don't say why, but I have a pretty good idea why. He probably never went to school because he stayed locked up in his room practicing all the time. So they expelled him. So at 14, he can play the living heck out of the trumpet, and he's not in school anymore. So what does he do? He goes on the road as a professional musician in the Midwest, traveling around playing. And there wasn't a lot in those days. You know, King Arm and those guys, they're still in New Orleans, and the great migration is just starting. But he's playing little regional gigs here and there, you know, getting to know a few musicians, this and that. And these little regional bands, they would break up, and sometimes he would get with a show, a minstrel show, or even a carnival or something. And those things would last for a while. And several times the show ended in a place that he was too far from to go home easily. And memorable for him was being dropped off on the side of the road in Youngstown, Ohio, and having to figure out how he's going to make it back to Pittsburgh. You know, that's not so far if you got a car, but if you're on your feet, that's a long way. But he made it back. He regrouped, and he went out again with another one of those show bands. And this band traveled extensively. But while on the road, they went to a place called Cumberland, Maryland. And let's just say he encountered some racism there that changed him for the rest of his life. He quit the band and went back to Pittsburgh, which he considered safe. He started his own band and started working out of Pittsburgh with his own band for 3 or 4 years. Somewhere around 20, he decided he'd do it again. So he goes out there and he tries to get in Horace Fletcher's band. You're telling me, well, who is Horace Fletcher? Well, have you ever heard of Fletcher Henderson? Well, Horace was Fletcher Henderson's brother. He went by the name Horace Henderson. And they had this little scam. Horace had his band, Fletcher had his band, and Horace would call his band the Fletcher Henderson Jazz Orchestra, led by Horace Henderson. That was the first big gig that little jazz had. And that went great. And he gets to travel to cities that he hadn't been, like New York. And he came back home, and as soon as he did, his brother Joe said, hey man, I'm in Detroit. I got a really good gig here. We're playing on the radio every night. You can get your name out there, get your music out there. You ought to come to Detroit. So boom, there he goes to Detroit. And just like his brother promised, he was on the radio. His reputation is growing and growing and growing and growing. he ends up coming back home again and going out on the road with an even bigger group, until finally he worked himself up after visiting Chicago for a while to a band led by the great drummer Gene Krupa, whose singer at that time was a brand new rookie on the jazz scene known as Anita O'Day, who is probably one of the most popular jazz singers of the day. And she wasn't black. That made her really, really interesting to a lot of people. And but Roy had some problems with it. Roy was also a singer. They sang together and played together, and you know, it worked out for a while, but he didn't like it so much. And Krupa ended up getting pulled over by the police, and they found, let's just say, some flowers on him that people were smoking at that time, and he had to go away for a while. So that ended that gig. So then he goes off and he has to find another gig. This guy played with everybody. And about this time, he ended up playing with Benny Goodman's band. Now, this is funny to me, is that they're saying that this is the 30s, and there were not a whole lot of blacks who were playing in public with white bands. That could end your life real fast. It was quite common that they played in clubs together in private, but to put a guy on the stage for you and he don't look like you in the 1930s, ooh, that could cause some big problems. But it wasn't a big deal for Gene Krupa, you see, because the first time black musicians and white musicians ever appeared in public was with Gene Krupa, Benny Goodman, Teddy, and Lionel Hampton. That was the first one. So here we got Little Jazz first being on stage in an all-white band led by Gene Krupa, and then later being a member of Benny Goodman's group. So that shows you how rare this was, because it's just two guys that were allowing that in the 30s, Gene Krupa and Benny Goodman. Now, this continues gig after gig after gig. He ended up traveling to Europe with Benny Goodman's band and decided he wasn't coming back home. He had a lot of problems with racism, and he just did not enjoy the scene in America at that time. So he stayed in Paris, like a whole lot of jazz musicians who went to Europe for the first time, landed in Paris, fell in love, and some of them never came back, and some stayed for years and years and years. Now, he came back home eventually, and he ended up working with a guy named Teddy Hill. Most people don't know about Teddy Hill because he was not such a great musician, but he was very pivotal in the development of bebop. You see, Teddy Hill was a band leader, played several instruments, and he was pretty good at that whole scene. But starting somewhere around 1935, 36, just as the whole bebop thing is evolving, he became the manager of Minton's Playhouse, which was a gathering place for experimental jazz at that time known as bebop. Everybody was there. Thelonious Monk was there, Charlie Parker was there, Dizzy Gillespie was there, and he was probably in diapers, but he was there, and it was all happening. And of course, Roy had a shortcut because he knew Teddy very well. He played with him for years. So at the beginning of this new music, Roy walked in the front door and everybody goes, "Who is this guy?" Count Basie heard him on a recording of a tune called Rocking Chair. Yeah, you can figure out what that is if you think about it hard enough. It's jazz, and the tune's called Rocking Chair. And Little Jazz was really just enthusiastic about this tune. And he played his butt off, high notes, fast lines, everything. He must have been 17, 18 years old by this time. And Count Basie is like, I have never heard a trumpet player that good in my life. And this is Count Basie, who had some of the best trumpet players in the world playing with him. But this 17-year-old kid really impressed him. That's who you have missed if you're not hip to Mr. David Roy Eldridge. I should be about done, but Roy wasn't done, so I can't be done either. I'm going to keep rolling if that's okay with you. Yeah, so he did the whole New York thing, he did the traveling thing, he did the Europe thing, he did this, he did that. He did sideman gigs. In other words, someone called him up, he answered the phone, and he would meet him where they say meet him and play a gig. That's the way it went. There's a big thing by Norman Granz that was called Jazz at the Philharmonic. He was on that tour. He also participated in a protest of the Newport Jazz Festival, in which a bunch of musicians who were sort of more reckless bebop musicians, Thelonious Monk, Charlie Mingus, Abbey Lincoln, great singer, who was married to a wonderful drummer named Max Roach. Max was on the gig. They had this thing called Jazz Artists Guild, and they did a musical protest at the Newport Jazz Festival. Not sure what year, but what they were saying is, you are beginning to program all of this commercial music, and jazz is being put in the back row. If you want jazz, put it on the front row, or we gonna tell all our friends, don't come back here because this is not a jazz-friendly situation. Well, things will be as things are gonna be. But to this day, Newport still programs jazz, although not as thoroughly as they did back in the 40s, 50s, etc. He had a heart attack in 1980. And everybody thought that would end it, because when you're playing high notes like that, that puts a whole lot of pressure on him. Nope, didn't stop him. There was a club in New York, not in the Village, but on 54th, not far from 52nd Street. You all know all about 52nd, called Jimmy Ryan's Jazz Club. And what Jimmy Ryan's Jazz Club is, it was, how do I say this? It was a throwback jazz club. There was a movement of people who never accepted bebop. So what they tried to do is find as many old musicians as they can and bring them back playing the old traditional New Orleans jazz, which they called Dixieland. I hate that word, but that's what they called it. And that's what they put forward as real jazz. Well, Roy ended up working there for a long time at the end of his life. Although he is credited with being the pivotal trumpet player to make the transition from swing playing to bebop playing. He is the guy. He had all the tools, the high notes, the fast stuff, all of it. Matter of fact, I consider him to be the straight line, missing link between Louis Armstrong and Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy played more like Roy than anyone. And Roy could play like Louis, or he could play like Dizzy, because he was the first to do that. At the end of his life, he still couldn't stop, even after heart attacks and all that mess. He just switched. He went back to his original thing. He started playing drums. He started playing a little piano. You start playing some instruments that are not so hard on your heart, not so hard on your body. And that extended his life for almost another decade. Yeah. He was honored by everybody, Downbeat, Jazz Award, so many others that come from the jazz world, not from the commercial world. Those are high honors for him. He stayed at Ryan's pretty much till his death, still making music, still doing occasional concerts, and occasionally playing the trumpet. His wife, Viola, died, I think it's 89, and 3 months after she passed away, Roy followed her because I guess he felt she needed to hear his trumpet. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. David Roy Eldridge, born in Pittsburgh, North Side, baby, in 1911. Stayed with us for the good part of a century and made jazz in every form the entire time, and is credited as creating the pattern that led to Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and so many other great trumpet players. I hope you've enjoyed this. I most certainly learned a whole lot. But if you really want to enjoy this, go listen to recordings by David Roy Eldridge. Thank you.